Since graduating from Central Bible College, he has pastored 3 different churches located in small, medium, and large towns and cities. Each grew and entered into building programs. Currently, he serves as the senior pastor right here at First Assembly of God, Humble, Texas, and he's been here for 24 years. Under his leadership, this church holds English and Spanish services, has engaging and growing ministries for children and youth, provides outreach to local nursing homes, prisons, to the homeless and those struggling with recovery from various habits. Pastor Poole will soon take his church through its 2nd building program under his pastorate. Pastor Poole has been married to Rhonda for 42 years, and they have 2 daughters, a son-in-law, and probably the best, at least that's what they tell me, 5 awesome, no, awe-inspiring, not awesome.
They're awesome.
Hey, Pastor Poole, that's a correct word to use right there, isn't it? Awesome. But he has 5 awe-inspiring grandchildren. Pastor Poole, over the years, to me and my family, has been a faithful pastor, a friend. He's a wonderful father and a husband. And 20 years ago, this last summer, he dedicated our daughter Morgan to the Lord. And so we kid together. Pastor Poole is an avid hunter. He loves the outdoor sports, and we figure that that dedication is the reason our daughter Morgan loves to hunt and fish and loves the outdoors. It happens somewhere in the dedication. And so let's give Pastor Milton Poole a hand. God bless you, Pastor. Love you.
Well, it's good to have this time together. I'm glad for all those that are online, that are viewing by video. I want you to know you count, and I realize that many of you are all across our district, and it's a privilege to get to speak to you as well. Why should you listen to me? I'm going to kind of throw out some reasons. I was born on Howard Creek on Promised Land Road, close to 4 sisters, 3 brothers, Monkey Run, Pilgrim's Rest, and Wild Hog in Arkansas. My dad said, that's too backwoodsy for my kids. We got to move uptown. So we moved to Missouri, close to Pea Ridge, smack out Cedar Gap, and Lick Skillet. When I first discovered America, we had running water if you run and got it. Instead of so many rooms and baths, we had so many rooms and a path. I didn't grow up with a lot of silver spoon type treatment. Brother Randy was talking last night about everybody has that one great talent. And I have to confess, and I say this in all honesty, it's not meant for false modesty. I'm still looking for mine. I genuinely think, God, what do I do well? And I'm still looking. I can't preach like John Hagee. I can't play musical instruments like Don and Beth Wee. I can't roll out great poems like Jim Ryan. All I can do is just be who I am. But here's something I want to throw in is that some of you out there, you see some of these all-stars and you think, God, I can never do that. Well, I want to encourage you, you need to hear some things from somebody like me that doesn't have all the talent like those guys and know that God can still use you. So here we go. I have 20 points for effective ministry. I'm going to put those kind of in double time due to our time that we have here. I'm going to give you some of the scriptures that you have in your notes. They're all in red letter. I know that usually that's for what Jesus said. To me, it's what God says, so it's divine, all of it. But for me, it's kind of a thing that it kind of helps me distinguish my notes better. So that's why it's all in red. I'm going to read some of the scriptures. Some of them I'll just kind of allude to them due to time, and we'll kind of go through these. But number one, I believe to have an effective and successful ministry, it is very important that you have a prayer life. James 5:16 says, confess your trespasses to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. The effective, fervent prayer of the righteous man avails much. If you miss anything, don't miss this first point. In your life, as a pastor, as a minister, as a missionary, whatever God chooses to use you for, know that it's important to have a prayer life. By the way, each of these 20 points I'm going to give you quickly here, if you'd like to take them home and develop them, they will all preach a sermon by themselves. Okay, secondly, you need, number one, if you don't get anything, get these first 3 points. Number 2, develop a work ethic. If you don't have a work ethic, you're not going to be successful in ministry. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 29 says, "Do you see a man who excels in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before unknown men." Here's something to realize that I've watched through the years, these years since I graduated Bible college. I've kind of kept a running, list of guys that and ladies that are successful in ministry, and I'm qualifying successful simply by meaning they're still out there doing it. They haven't fizzled, they haven't burned out, they're still out there doing it. It's not a certain size church. They're still faithfully preaching the gospel. To me, that's successful. But the one thing that, besides a prayer life, that I think is so important, I remember most of these, that many of them worked in the cafeteria. They worked on the grounds crew. They worked sometimes the midnight shift at a motel, but they all had a work ethic. Those that everything seemed to be paid for by daddy's money and they didn't have to work and everything was just run around, play around campus and have a good time. And I know that doesn't sound like a Bible college, but it really happened in ours. I don't know where those guys are. I don't know where those girls are. And one of my desires was to go back to Central Bible College, my alma mater, and to share that with the students. And Maurice Lednicki, the president there, invited me, and I was able, that was one of the things I wanted to tell them. You must have a work ethic. If you don't, you won't make it. Point number 3. Diligently study the Bible. Paul told Timothy in chapter 2 of 2 Timothy, verse 15, "Study to show yourself approved, a workman who need not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth, but avoid foolish babblings, that they will increase to more ungodliness." Here's something to know, is you should be, and the next point there is to become a lifetime student. Paul even told Timothy, give attendance to reading. He also told him, he said, when you're coming this way, I want you to bring my parchments. Paul, even though he's in prison and maybe didn't even have much time to live, he's saying, I still want to study the Word. It's important that you know the Word. When you're meeting with different people to counsel with them, whatever you're doing, I think that it's important that you know the Word, be a student of the Word. And I think about our junior Bible quiz kids. It's so important that they're getting the Word in their life. When they come to the point that they are ready to go out into life, I'm amazed at how many of them that were some of the champions there go out and they become great Christians. Number 5, obtain wisdom. Wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom, and in all your gettings, get understanding. I'm going to couple it with number 6 that's below it there, learn to have people skills. You don't have to be the greatest talent. I think I'm evidence of that. You don't have to be born with natural people skills. I've seen people that are naturals. Everybody loves them. Everything seems to go well. They communicate real well, but you don't always have to be born that way. A lot of these things are learnable. Learn the value of smiling. Learn the value of knowing somebody's name. Learn the value of listening instead of talking all the time. But learn these values that many of them are given in the wisdom literature of the Psalms and in the Proverbs of Solomon, that it says, get wisdom, get wisdom. If he's saying get wisdom, that lets me know it's not always wisdom that you are born with. Get understanding, learn these things, get some people skills, and learn how to work with people, and it will help immensely. I think that when he talks about wisdom and it being the principal thing, I see our district officials can tell you many things. I'd like to announce that I'm not running for any office. And I appreciate them more because I've been a presbyter before, and they go through a lot of situations with trouble in churches. We always want to say it's the bad deacon over here, the bad member here, or somebody like that. A lot of times it's pastors not using wisdom. And you can ask the guys afterwards, and it's important that we learn to speak wisely. You know, one little tidbit. You're in the middle of someone that's angry and argumentative and loud. The Bible says a soft answer turns away wrath. You try this sometime if you're dealing with someone that's obnoxious and hard and angry, and just begin to soften your voice about half your normal volume, and you watch, it has a calming effect on those people. Where do you get wisdom? You can read it in God's Word, other places. While it's not a Christian book, I think How to Win Friends and Influence People is a good book, just to read it, to learn some of these basic people skills. Number 7, lead people as an example of a generous giver. Scripture says, but a generous man devises generous things, and by generosity he shall stand. If you are telling your people, we're going to build a building, we're going to give to missions, we're going to go to this cause or that cause, and you don't lead them by example, you say, oh, I'm too poor to give. You're never too poor to give. The poorest person in your congregation is wealthy compared to many of the people in third world countries. And I found even there, they can give. Give of what you have, set an example, and God will bless you. Number 8, find successful mentors. Find successful older mentors. Why older? There's an example here in 1 Kings chapter 12, verses 6 through 8. I'm not going to take the time to read it, except to say, King Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, is following one of the greatest successful kings in Israel's history as far as the wealth and the elegance of the kingdom and the splendor of the palace and the temple and all of these things. He is following a great, great man. Sometimes it's hard to follow a great man even in a church. And he's needing advice. What do I do? There's people coming with complaints. What do I do? And they were worried about taxes particularly. People are still worried about taxes. It's one of the issues when we come election time. He said to his father's advisors that had helped him in many wise ways, what do I do? He said, listen to them. Cut their taxes down. They'll serve you and they'll be faithful to you. And then he consulted with guys that were younger guys that were his age. Now, these are guys that don't always have experience. Why do you say, can I not learn from guys my own age? Absolutely. But there's things that you're going to learn from people that have been through it and kind of have earned their stripes, so to speak. He listened to the guys that were his own age that said, you know, you need to come back, talk to him roughly, say, if you think that my father was tough, he said, if he whipped you with a little whip, I'm going to whip you with scorpions. I'm going to be stronger. My muscles are going to be huge, and I'm going to make it rougher than rough on you. And 10 tribes cut out on him. And so he was left with 2 tribes. That's just one case, but I could tell you many, many, many times that it's wise to have older mentors in your life. Many of the things that I've learned through the years, I've had at least in a couple of the churches that I've pastored former pastors, and even though I was the pastor, it was really the other way around. They pastored me, they helped me, they mentored me, they taught me wisdom in areas that I didn't have it. And sometimes I think they actually saved my bacon. Coming here even, he was not the former pastor, but he was former pastor of other churches, R.I. Stewart. This man, you could ask him to dismiss in prayer, and he would quote about a whole chapter of the Bible. But he poured into me, and let some of these men and women pour into your life and give you wisdom. Number 9, hang out with people you wish to be like. Hang out with people you wish to be like. Now, if you want to be like someone that has failed in every endeavor that they had. You know, they're always saying, oh, well, I've been over here at this burn-over field, and nobody can pastor there. Paul couldn't pastor there. And someone else says, well, you know, we have this ministry of cleaning out churches. By the way, I actually sat with people that told me that. That was their ministry, cleaning out churches, getting rid of all the troublemakers. If that's what you want to be like, hang around them. But if you want to have a good ministry, hang around, whether it's youth pastor or pastor or whatever, find somebody that's doing it well and successful at it. And you will find that they will build you up. You will tend to be like the 5 people that you're closest to, whoever they are. Economically, you'll be a lot like them. Intelligence, you will be a lot like them. Spiritually, you will be a lot like them. You will find that you'll tend to come to about the same level of those that you tend to hang out with. So that can be a great thing. Proverbs 12:26. The righteous should choose his friends carefully, for the way of the wicked leads him astray. Proverbs 27, verse 17. As iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friend. Number 10, don't spend your time worrying about money. I see pastors that are always worried about money. Are they being paid enough? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? Jesus said, consider the lilies of the field and how they don't toil and they don't spin. And Solomon in all of his glory was not arrayed as one of them. I came here, I did not know what the church would pay. Is that smart? It might not be. I just trusted God it would be okay. Everywhere I've been, I don't mean this to brag, but I've either cut my salary, refused raises, or whatever. Everywhere I've been, and God has blessed me. I believe that God will bless you if you don't get focused on money, trying to make too much of it or focusing on the lack of it. Trust God, and if you're faithful with your finances. By the way, a lot of times I see people saying, oh, I just don't know what I'm going to do. I can't even tithe. You can't afford not to tithe. And I believe that it's important that we all have part of who I am to each of you. It needs to be that you're faithful with your finances to God. You trust Him, and He's going to take care of you. He really would. I'd like to have time that I could just share a bunch of testimonies that my wife and I have gone through where God would supernaturally provide. He is a provider. He is Jehovah Jireh, the Lord our provider. Number 11, keep the home fires burning. Proverbs 5:18 says, let your fountain be blessed and rejoice with the wife of your youth. I enjoyed Sister Gloria Marino's speaking this morning when she talked about a lot of the ethics that we need to do. You know, I'm going to throw in a couple of things here real quickly, not to try to re-preach her sermon. But one of the things I've done for many years when I'm in counseling, and if it's a member of the opposite sex, one of the things I've said, and I do like to have like my secretary or my wife or someone sitting with us. Sometimes that's available. Sometimes it's not always. Sometimes I will counsel people sitting at a pew when there's hundreds of people milling around. Why? Because I don't have anything to hide. We put windows in our doors of our offices and stuff. But one of the things I start out with early on, I'm not trying to insult the person or anything. I just simply say very inconspicuously, you know, my wife is my best friend. We sure love each other. Now, what I've done is, without offending the person, I've laid down a boundary here. This man loves the wife he's got, and there's not anybody going to take her place. And that's important. Now, I have an evangelist friend. I don't know if you want to use his advice, but he said when he traveled around in the ministry years ago, he said there would be women come up to him, and they were kind of hitting on him, to be honest. He said, you know what I did? I said, I have no clue. He said, I'd start picking my nose, and I'd try to do it grossly. And he said, you know, they just kind of dissipated and left. So I thought I'd just throw that in. I don't know if that's wisdom or not, but it got rid of anybody hitting on him. So if I see you all at district council next year and you're all picking your nose, I'll know what happened. Number 12, This is already in your notes from some of the other sessions, and some of the things I'm saying are going to be a little repetitious of what Brother Chapin has said, what Gloria and others have said. And maybe that's one reason that God is wanting it repeated several times so that we really get it. But be honest to a fault. Maintain integrity in all you do. Psalm 15, verse 4. In whose eyes a vile person is despised, but he honors those who fear the Lord, he who swears to his own hurt and does not change. That means even if it's going to cost you, officer, I really was speeding. I admit it. He swears to his own hurt. I'm guilty. I'll pay the fine. You still do it. I learned honesty from the most honest man I ever knew and the most honest woman I ever knew. And that takes in all the pastors' wives and ministers and missionaries and godly people. My mom and dad. And my dad at the time was a sinner. And yet he had had it drilled in by his dad. You don't tell lies. And I can honestly say he may have been mistaken on something a time or two. Never once did I ever hear either one of them tell one single lie. Not for tax reasons, not for any reason. They were honest. And if you make that part of what you are, it will be worth your time. Number 13, refuse to become jealous of others. Does this ever happen in ministry? You better know it does. And if you allow yourself to get jealous of somebody else's ministry, you think, well, I'm more talented than they are. I never had to worry about that. But you get to think, I'm more talented than they are. And they pastor this church, or they get this break, or chosen for some honor. Get it out of your system. Wrath is cruel, and anger a torment. But who is able to stand before jealousy? Proverbs 27, verse 4. Number 14, along the same line. Don't fall into a comparison trap. Brother Chapin mentioned this moments ago. 1 Samuel chapter 18, verses 7 and 8. So the women sang and they danced and said, Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000s. Then Saul was very angry, and the saying displeased him, and he said, they have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed only thousands. Now what more can he have than the kingdom? This absolutely ate the lunch of a king, a man that God has honored and placed in such a position that he should have been above such, but he was not. One thing that's been discouraging this election cycle is the levels of anger and slurs and stuff that's being tossed about. But Saul fell into the jealousy and the comparison trap. You're going to compare yourself with your pastor friend, youth pastor, whoever he may be, his car, his house, his position. There's always somebody that's going to have it a little nicer. There's always somebody that don't have it as nice. Don't get into comparison. Be happy with who you are. Become comfortable with who you are. Cars are a small thing. They've never been a huge thing with me. But I drive a pickup. I really like it. I always try to buy them used. The one that I had just before the one I have now, I drove it until it had almost 300,000 miles on it. I'm not trying to be so frugal that I can't buy one. I can go out and buy any truck in the city. And I don't mean that braggingly. I can. You know, if you've got enough credit, you can do that. But seriously, I'm not worried about trying to impress people with what kind of vehicle I have. I don't have to have one to keep up with someone over here. I'm very pragmatic. I don't have to have a Rolex. When I have a watch, I can get a watch that comes from Walmart or wherever. I buy a watch to tell time. I buy a truck or a car to get me where I want to go. It's not about impressing someone. I like what Dave Ramsey, that teaches on financial peace. He said too many people are spending like $600 or $700 a month to impress a guy at a stoplight that he'll never see again. Let me move on. Fear not. Exercise being a man or a woman of faith. Proverbs 29, verse 25, The fear of man brings a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord shall be safe. God's going to call you into some tough situations. Some of you may be missionaries, and you may go into a foreign situation where your life's on the line. Some of us here in the coming months and years may see things we never dreamed we would see. One of the things I'm told, and I'm going to call the name, and so be it. Guys are trying to drown me out, but you need to hear this. Go ahead, Johnny, tell them to leave. One of the things that I heard Hillary Clinton say is that she is going to force religions, and that means by means of the law, to accept her stand on abortion and on transgender and all of these hot topics. And it may be a day. Some of you may go to jail for what you believe, but you're still not to be a man or woman of fear. We think that persecution always has to be in other countries. I'm getting daily things in emails about people, and there's a lady right now that is sentenced to be hanged in Pakistan for the crime of simply being a Christian. We need to realize that we don't walk in fear, we walk in faith, and become a man or a woman of faith. Don't worry about the people that are going to be threatening you. God is going to take care of it. Number 16, learn to recognize the voice of God. I won't read all of it, but God's revelation to Elijah. You know, he heard the earthquake, he saw it, he saw the boom, the thunder, everything that was there. He saw the fire and all of these different things, the rocks breaking into pieces. What a display. And he said, I didn't hear God at all. And then he said, I still heard a small voice, a whisper, a still small voice. Learn God's voice. Learn to distinguish it from the voice of Satan, the voice of the world, the voice of flesh. Learn it so clear. Jesus said, my sheep know my voice. When you learn the voice of God, he will direct you in the paths that you're to go. And you'll make a lot fewer mistakes in life. But once you learn the voice of God, it will guide you and it will bless you. Number 17, learn to wait on God. We're always in a hurry. We want instant everything. We flip on light switches and lights come on. We put biscuits in a little thing of, I don't know. My mother used to make wonderful homemade biscuits the old-fashioned way. They kneaded the dough. It took a long time. They put them in the oven. It took a long time, and they were wonderful. Today, we don't do that. We get these little tubes, and we whop them against the counter. And one guy said that in his neighborhood, there's so many whopping the counters over the neighborhood, it sounded like a small war. But anyway, we want instant biscuits. We want microwaves that zap things instantly so we don't have to wait. And yet, this flies in the face of our instant society. Wait on God. Habakkuk said in chapter 2, verse 3, for the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it will speak and it will not lie. Though it tarries, wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not tarry. You're seeking God. Do I go to this church? Do I accept this call to the mission field? Whatever it may be, you get before God and don't say, well, I think I'm going to do it, or if they accept my resume, I'll do it. You get before God and you need to know. I remember when I was making a decision shortly before we came to Texas, there was a church about twice the size of the one we were pastoring. And they called us. They invited us to preach. I talked with the people, interviewed them, my wife and I. It wasn't that they were bad people. They were nice people. It was a good situation. I liked basically everything I saw, but I never felt it. About the time we came here, this church was about half the size of the one we were pastoring. And it wasn't about a size of a church. It was about God's will. And so we told the other people, we said, no, we're not going to even try out. We just don't feel it's God. When we came here, We came here, and one of the first things that happened, Lyle Countryman, now on staff at Lindale with Pastor Randy, I remember he called me and he said, Doc, they had a meeting and you got trouble. They had fired the youth pastor, and people were mad. They thought I was behind it and all kinds of stuff. And my wife said, do you really think you're supposed to go there? I said, yep. Why? I said, because I've heard from God. And ladies and gentlemen, that's the important thing, is hear from God. It's not what you're going to see or hear down the grapevine that some other pastor in this section says, oh, I wouldn't go there on a bet. You know, it's God's will for somebody to pastor those churches. I think about how we're probably missing God when 2/3 of our population nearly of the nation are within 500 miles of Washington, D.C., and we have churches all around the Bible Belt, but we have cities of 100,000 plus without an Assemblies of God church. Somebody's missing God or not listening. Listen and hear from God. I could go on that a long time. I won't. Number 18, don't give up when you know you're in the will of God. Don't give up. There's times that discouragement's going to hit you. You're going to have times like Job's wife comes up to him. His best friends come up to him. Can you imagine? You're laying there feeling like you're ready to die, and your best friends come and they just stare at you for days and don't say a thing. I can't imagine, you know, if I'm sick and you visit me, don't just stare at me. Talk. Say something. And then when you say something, don't say you're here because you sinned. Encourage me in the Lord. You know, Job, you wouldn't be here, but you sinned. And then his wife comes up and said, Job, it's enough. Just curse God and die. Now, I love this one. Who was it talking about coming from a family of like 22 or 3 or 4 kids? Sandra? I love that, but I probably shouldn't say this, but to me it strikes me funny. They had 10 kids. This wasn't funny. They lost all 10 of them when Satan's attacking. But later on, this woman that had said, Job, just curse God and die, she has to have 10 more to get the blessing of God. So, I don't know. 20 kids, 1 woman. I don't know if that's poetic justice or God's justice or not. I'll let you theologians figure that one out, but it hits me funny. All right, let me go on. When you're in God's will, hang in there. Don't give up. Genesis 32, verse 26, and he said, let me go, for the day breaks. And he said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. That's Jacob wrestling with the angel. It's tough. His hip's been knocked out of joint. Everything, he's been beat up, but he's hanging on. I don't know if he's got a headlock on him or what, but he won't turn the angel of God loose. Don't turn loose. Don't give up when you know you're in the will of God. Number 19, get out of your comfort zone. Don't worry about everything being comfortable. Jonah gets a call from God. God says to him, arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, cry against it, for their wickedness has come up before me. Ninevites, the people of Nineveh, were some of the most fierce, most feared people in the history of man. They would literally skin their enemies alive and hang them on their walls. They had great knives that extended from the spokes and the wheels of their chariots, and they would go into a line of soldiers, literally mowing them and cutting legs into with these things. They thought of everything that they could to make their enemies suffer. And God says, that's where I want you to go. There's wicked people there. They need to know Jesus. By the way, the call of God doesn't always call you to the comfort zone. Amen? You know, everybody wants a call to Hawaii. Why is it that they don't want to go where the headhunters of New Guinea is? Why is it we want to go out where it's comfortable rather than out of our comfort zone? Lastly, and I'll wrap up with this, and we've got about 2 or 3 minutes, and I'm going to let you all out here by 12 unless you want to take a little time for question and answer. This one is, if there's anything that I would say that I don't really call it a talent, but defines who I am a dreamer. I am a dreamer. I've always had a dream. Genesis chapter 37, verse 19. By the way, this is a great text. I probably preached more sermons from this one text in the 24 years I've been here than any single text in the Bible. Genesis 37, verse 19, and they said to one another, look, this dreamer is coming. King James says, behold, this dreamer cometh. What can a dream do for you? Please don't think that I'm trying to make fun of someone with a speech impediment as I mention this to you. But some years ago, there was a young man that went into Bible college. In Bible college, it's one of the neatest experiences in the world. And, everybody's gathered together. They have got high ideals. This one says, I'm called to be an evangelist. This one, I'm going to be a great pastor. They're never going to be an ordinary pastor, great evangelist, great missionary. And they're sitting around, a bunch of these guys, and this one young man, his name was Joe. And the guys are saying, I'm going to be this, I'm going to be that. And they said to him, he said, what are you going to do? And with his speech impediment, he said, and they also asked him, who are you? He said, my name is Joe, and I'm going to be a preacher of the gospel. And they laughed at him. I mean, they horse laughed at him. Thought it was the funniest thing they ever heard. A guy like this is going to be a preacher of the gospel. One day, guys are all gathered around their dorm and all, but they happen to see the campus beauty walking down the sidewalk. And he looks at the guys and he says, hey, guys, I'm going to ask her for a date, and I'm going to marry her. And they said, what did you say? I'm going to ask her for a date, and I'm going to marry her. And if they thought it was funny that he was going to be a preacher, they really thought that was funny. And they began to badger him. When are you going to ask her for a date? They had a campus event that they were encouraging people to bring your dates to. And Joe told the guys, he said that he was going to take her to that event. And they said, how are you going to do it? He says, there's a certain time during the day she gets out of a class. There's a certain sidewalk that she walks down, and he had it timed down to the minute. And he said, I'm going to step out, and I'm going to ask her for a date. And but he didn't say it like that. He said, I'm going to ask her for a date. So these guys, being like spiritual Bible college men are, hid in the bushes to hear it. They were dying to hear Joe get turned down by the prettiest girl on the campus. And so it was amazing. Sure enough, right on key, here comes the campus beauty. And right on target at that moment, Joe steps right out in front of her, and he walks up to her and he says, I want to ask you a question. She said, what would you like to ask me, Joe? She knew who he was. Word had got around who he was. And he looked at her straight in the eye, and without even the slightest speech slur or impediment at all, he said, may I please have a date with you? And she said, I don't think I heard you right. Would you repeat that? The guys in the bushes are saying, we didn't hear that right either. He said, may I please have a date with you? She said, Joe, one more time, say that again. I don't think I heard you correctly. I mean, a Shakespearean actor couldn't have said it any better. May I please have a date with you? She said, Joe, you sure may. But I've got a question. Have you by any chance been practicing to ask me for a date? He said, I sure have. I've been practicing and practicing and practicing. Now, there is an epilogue to that story. He did go on his date with her. He did marry her and became a successful pastor. What's the point of all that? Joe had a dream. Joe had a dream. We had, and again, I'm not trying to claim to be anybody or anything in one sense, except I have been a dreamer. And I've tried to practice most of these things that you find in these notes. They've been part of who I am. But I had a guy come up to me. He was one of the old-timers of our church that had been here, I guess, since Hector was a pup. A long, long, long time. And we had a good crowd that day. Everything was looking good, and we were in the new building and everything. And he said, Pastor, he said, I bet you never dreamed that the church would ever be this. And I probably should have said modestly, no, I never had a clue. But I looked at him and I was honest. And I said, you know, really it did. Before we ever moved to this location, before that we ever had a larger crowd, in my spirit, I had a dream. And I had a dream that God was going to do something like what we're seeing today. I want to challenge everybody, you that's out there listening on the internet, I want to challenge you to have a dream. Go for it ethically, with integrity. Go for it without fear. Know God is with you. Hear from God. Whatever that vision or dream is, whether it's to be a missionary, a pastor, an evangelist, whatever God calls you to do, go for it for all you're worth. God bless you. And I will open it to questions. I know it's about time to leave. But if there's anyone that wants to take time for questions, the sooner you quit asking questions, the sooner you can go eat. Yes. You know, I would say one thing, by the way, my dream is not all about buildings. I do want to clarify that because we'll minister as many people off campus in a month as we do on campus. We have guys that, and I don't do it, but we have guys that go into prisons. They'll minister to hundreds of people there. They will see more saved there than we do here. We go every Sunday on downtown and feed the homeless, and we go into nursing homes and stuff. It's about people. That's the real church. But if there's anything, it's a tenacity. If somebody tells me I can't do something, I don't know, it just makes me a little more stubborn to roll up my sleeve and say, we're going to work hard, we're going to make it happen. But I believe this, if you're willing to work, and that's where a lot of people are going to be sifted out. They're not willing to work. A lot of them just want to let things happen. I want a position as a pastor. Here I am. What are you going to do while you're here? I don't know. We're just going to preach and have services. No, have a vision. See what God wants you to do. Try to see it go forward. Try to make it better when you leave than when you came. But you can do it. God has his hand on you. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Maybe you're defining my gift of being a dreamer. I don't know. That's something that does come natural to me. I've always been a dreamer, even as a little kid. However, I do want to say this. What we read there, though the vision tarry, wait for it. Many, many of us, even when you're in a general direction, you don't know the exact defining of the dream. Get before God and say, God, I don't know what you want me to do. And when I was in Bible college, I just had a general feeling God wanted me to do something. I saw all these people that were, I don't know, the blue bloods, I would call them. They were super spirituals that had dreams and visions and audible voices and the boom of thunder and the flash of lightning and all of that. And God told them to be a missionary to this country or preach as an evangelist and all that. I said, God, all I have is just thinking you want me to do something. I don't have a clue. And waiting before God, God began to speak to me some things, and he didn't even tell me pastor, evangelist, missionary. And he just said, if you're yielded to me, there's nowhere it's going to be withheld from you. Not saying that means you're going to be a worldwide evangelist, just simply that wherever you're at, God will give you a ministry. And I kind of took that as my calling. I've been here 24 years. Am I called to be a pastor? Part of the time I am. But I don't feel like that my whole calling is just to be a pastor. I had some people thought I backslid when I said that one time. But I've been privileged to do mission work and other works. But sometimes it's talking to one person like Jesus did at the well. That's ministry wherever you're at. But God, if you seek him, he will make such a clear call and vision for you. You don't have to have a natural dream or tendency. And some of those are just pipe dreams that we don't need to hold on to. You need God's dream, and that's the one that matters. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Listening to God, as I interact with some people, some people will say, God told me. I keep searching to hear God's voice, and for me, it's a difficult thing. It's an area that I would really like to grow a whole lot. I do see the Holy Spirit making impressions on my mind. But even within the good decisions, if God is in it, a good decision, there could be a better decision than the good decision. Within decisions that are good, are good, there could be a better one than what you're making. So I would really like to know how to hear from God and be sure.
Okay. I think that's an excellent question. Here's the thing. Brother Don, and his wife attended here for quite a while. And I think they would tell you, this was years ago when he was CE director, it's a rare thing to hear me say, God told me this for you. But when I do say it, I want people to be able to put it in the bank. Because if people say, God told me to tell you this, and he didn't tell them, it's a very easy way to manipulate people. We never want to do that. Sometimes I will say, I feel strongly in my spirit we should do this. God has not vocally told me, but I really feel it's God. And sometimes it's growing in your spirit. But many times I see God confirm his will through his word. Sometimes I'll feel an impression in my heart, and someone will come and say, I don't know what this is, but God has impressed me to give you this thought. And it's exactly what I've been praying about. Not everybody that comes and says, I got a word from the Lord for you. Be careful. The Bible says prove or try every spirit. But it usually is going, if you get a word from someone else and they're giving you a special direction, usually it's going to confirm what God is already dealing with you about. Other times I've had times that I've heard people say it's too shallow, you should never do it. But I've had times I said, God, I just need to hear from you today, and open my Bible and it falls to a verse that in 1,000 years I don't think I could make it accidentally fall to that verse. It's times that God speaks, and I very much honor those. There are some that I admire greatly that have had God speak in an audible voice, and kind of like a lot of the others, you have the audible voice that Samuel heard, and you have Isaiah seeing this great vision of the Lord high and lifted up. But when Elijah's there, he said, here's all this demonstration of nature, the earthquake, the fire, the breaking of the rocks, and all these things. And he said, but God wasn't there, but I heard the still small voice. And as you walk with God, and as you pray, and you grow in God, and you read his word, because he'll never say anything against his word. It will always confirm what he says. But he will always give you something that's in accord with his word. But many times it's that still small voice. The more you walk with God, the more familiar you're going to be with that soft, still small voice. He may speak to you in a vision, a dream, many things. There's a lot of ways, but if you stay before God, just like finding the dream is also finding the voice of God to tell you what to do, is wait for it. Hang on till you hear from God. Okay, anyone else? Brother Don.